let's look at some examples of complex fractions. Complex fractions are basically fractions where you're going to have another fraction either in the numerator or the denominator, or in this case, you have a fraction in both the numerator and the denominator. So we're going to go through a few examples. Each one will get progressively a little bit more difficult than the last one. So we start out here, and the first thing you want to do to make this a little bit easier is you want to write this out a different way, a more linear way. So I'm going to write this out as 3/4 divided by 7/10. And this is the same thing as this. We're just writing it out this way. And now the next step is we're just going to flip this, the second fraction, and we're going to multiply these two fractions together. You might be familiar with this method of solving fractions when you have to divide two fractions. So we just do 3/4, and we're going to multiply, and we're going to flip this, so we're going to have 10/7. 3/4 times 10/7. Then you're just going to take 3 times 10, that's 30, and 4 times 7, that's 28. And we can actually reduce this further. We just have to find some common factor that both can be divided by. So you can divide both these by 2. 30 divided by 2 will give you 15, and 28 divided by 2 will give you 14. Now this is a improper fraction. If your teacher wants you to convert it to a mixed number, then it would simply become 1 1/14. So either one of these two answers, they're both the same thing, but either one of these two answers is what your final answer will be. And you can also see, going back here, that you could have actually reduced this earlier. You could have taken you could have just divided both of these by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is going to give you 5. 3 times 5 would give you 15. 2 times 7 would give you 14. And then there's one other little trick you can use. So before we did any of this, you actually could have reduced it right here, this 4 and this 10. So you can actually reduce both denominators and both numerators. Now 3 and 7, there's no factor we can divide those two by to reduce them, but 4 and 10, as we saw over here, we can divide those by 2. And you could have reduced this to 3/2, 7/5, and you would have come up with the same answer here. Let's look at an example that's a little bit more complicated. Okay, so let's look at this example. It is a little bit different. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to try to combine these numbers to just get one number on the top and one number on the bottom. So when you have 2 2/3 here, the first thing you want to do is try to find, you would convert this 2 into a fraction. So you have to find some sort of common denominator. And so you're looking for a denominator of 3. So I can see that that's going to be 6/3 plus 2/3. And I did that just by kind of viewing this as 2/1, but we can't add those together because they don't have a common denominator. So I just multiplied both the numerator and the denominator by 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. 6/3 is the same thing as 2. So now we have this on top, and this is the same thing as this. It's just written differently. And we will be able to combine these, but we'll do that after we take care of this. So same thing here. I can also change this 2 to 6 over 3 using the same method I used over here. Now down here we have 6 over 3 minus 2/3. So let's go ahead and combine these. We're going to subtract down here and add up here. The denominator will stay the same. It's going to be 3. 6 plus 2 is going to be 8. So we have 8 over 3 on top. Down here, denominator will stay the same. Numerator, 6 minus 2 will give us 4. So now we have something a little bit cleaner over here. And now we're just going to solve this the same way we did the last problem. Write it out kind of like this. 8 over 3 divided by 4 over 3. And then simply just do 8 over 3 times the inverse of this. So just flip it over, times 3/4. And then just go ahead and multiply here. 8 times 3 is 24. 3 times 4 is 12. And that will reduce to 2. 12 goes into 24 twice. So your final answer here is 2. Let's look at one more problem. Okay, let's look at this problem. So we have 2 fractions in the numerator and 2 in the denominator. First thing we want to do is we want to add these together and subtract these. We'll start up here. We need to find a common denominator in order to do this, because when you're adding or subtracting fractions, that's what you have to do. So I can see here that we can multiply this by 2 to get a common denominator of 12. So we'll still have our 7 over 12. I'm going to multiply this fraction by 2. So times 2 times 2. And we're going to get 10 on top and then 12 on the bottom. So now we turn this into 10/12. And on the bottom here, I'm going to have to do something to both of these. So I'm going to try to get these to have a common denominator of 6. So we'll start over here. I'm going to need to multiply this fraction, both the top and the bottom, by 3 to make that happen. So times 3 times 3. Now we're going to have 3 over 6. And over here, I'm going to multiply this fraction by 2. Times 2 times 2. I'm going to get 4 over 6. Yes, 4 over 6. Remember, this one is subtracted. So let's add this together and subtract this. 7 plus 10, it's going to give us 17 on top. The 12 will remain the same. 3 minus 4 is going to give us negative 1 over 6. So now we have something we can work with here. And let's write this in a more linear way. So 17 over 12 divided by negative 1/6. Then we're just going to use this multiplication method where we multiply and flip this around to be 6 over 1, and it's still negative, which means our answer will be negative since we have a positive number here and a negative one here. 17 times 6 is 102. And 12 over 1, or 12 times 1 rather, is 12. And after looking at this, I can see that I can reduce this by dividing both these numbers by 6. So So it's going to be negative 12 divided by 6 is going to give me 2 on the bottom. 102 divided by 6, I'm going to work it out up here. 6 goes into 10 once. Use this with 42. 6 goes into 42 7 times. So negative 17 over 2 will be our final answer here. And I should also mention real quick that this 17 over 2, or negative 17 over 2 rather, can be turned into a mixed number. It could be turned into negative 8 over 1/2, if that's what you're looking for. If you're settling for an improper fraction, then negative 17 over 2 is your final answer. Any questions? Comment below.